Hello and welcome to Kickback Science Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Luke. This podcast is your place to get the tools and knowledge necessary to navigate the world of health and wellness. So kick back, let's talk science. This is good content. This stuff has gone crazy. We'll jump into it. Let's dive in. Let's do a little science. I'm going nitty gritty science right now.
I've been looking forward to this.
Kind of going on a little bit of a tangent.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
The information we discuss in this podcast is not meant to be taken as medical advice. It is simply informative. We're not affiliated with any organization or institution, just a few guys talking science and having fun.
All right, Dr. Luke. What the heck is sleep and why do we need it?
That's a doozy.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't get any sleep last night. Did you guys?
It's actually
Zero.
really funny how we're recording this podcast. It's such a ironic time. I just got off a week of night shift rotation, and right now is when I'm usually going to sleep as opposed to waking up. And it's
Did you do night shift
crazy.
last night?
Nope, last night I didn't.
Oh,
So
okay.
last night,
Okay.
yeah, it was my first night back to trying to switch back to a normal human being, and I slept like shit because it's like my body has been used to being wide awake. So I woke up at 2 a.m. and was like, all right,
awake.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's really weird because the first night is the hardest because
You're flipping your schedule.
yeah, and so I took a nap and then went in and I was able to stay awake with caffeine, but then 3 a.m. till 8 a.m., I'm like a zombie.
Yeah.
It's crazy what that does. And we're going to talk a little bit about the circadian rhythm component, but it's actually funny. So my first night doing on this night shift rotation, I had to drop Cato off at your house, Joe.
Yep.
And because Allie does nights too.
Yep.
So we didn't want to keep him home alone
Had a little
all night. He would have been a
sleepover
little
with
scared.
Sasquatch.
Yeah. So I dropped the dog off at Joe's on my way to the hospital, and my shift gets done and I'm driving back to your house, which I've gone to your house a million times,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And I feel fine. And I pull into the wrong driveway. So you've got,
way.
there's a
Nice.
there's another 4-way stop that's just north of you guys. And it's got the same kind of setup where their driveway actually kind of looks like your driveway, and it's so close to the 4-way stop that I went through this 4-way stop, pulled into that driveway. Now, I'll show it to you. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know.
Yeah.
Except for theirs isn't gravel.
It is. Well, I think it's dirt. It's not like a regular driveway.
Oh,
unless
really?
it's really beat up. I don't know. Like I said, I was in a trance. So I pull into this driveway and I'm like, this isn't their house. And I had to reverse and that just from being so sleep deprived, I couldn't even get to your house. The hospital provides this free taxi service to night shift
really?
employees. Yes, because it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
And to be driving sleep deprived,
Until you
I
get
didn't even
into
know where
that
I was
routine
going.
of staying up at night.
Yeah, so they provide this free service.
It
I don't know.
picks you up and takes you home.
No, basically they just give you Uber vouchers, and you tell the hospital hey,
Interesting. Yeah.
I didn't feel comfortable driving home, so I took a taxi, and they'll pay for it like a voucher, like your company will pay for a meal or something.
That's actually cool that they do that.
Wow.
I didn't know.
It is, and it's because we know how risky it is. There is a study that looked at people who were deprived of sleep for one night, and I'm blanking on I'm on hours. It was pretty extreme. I think it was to a 4-hour reduction in sleep, and their cognitive function was surpassed. It was worse than somebody who's at a 0.08 alcohol.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
And so it's you've got a night of poor sleep and you're driving, you're basically drunk driving.
Yeah.
And
Well, you could it's crazy how you can be driving and your eyes are open, but you're falling asleep at the same time, and then all of a sudden you're out.
yeah. I
Just
mean,
like
and you
that.
think of the amount of time it takes for you to switch a lane. If you all of a sudden doze off, you're in the other lane. And
It doesn't take long at all.
yeah, these
It's happened to me.
deaths caused by these car accidents and such that are related to sleep are such a problem. And a lot of it is
overnight shifters.
Overnight shifters, and then also students, like kids in high school, and actually, yeah, I mean, it's usually kids in high school. Our start times at our schools are so early, and that age, when you're a teenager, your brain is still developing. You actually need more sleep than we do as adults. You know, they need like 10 to 12 hours of sleep.
Wow.
But we force them to wake up to catch a bus sometimes at like 6 o'clock, which means you got to get up at 5 a.m. And some students are driving because you're 16 in high school, and then they're driving to school and getting in car accidents. There was actually a study done that was out in California, and Edina School District was part of this too, where they looked at what happens when we delay school start times, and they push it back. I think it was only like 40 minutes. And what happens to accidents, car accidents from students, and it declined so much. Just letting these students sleep a little bit longer,
Crazy.
they were getting in so many less car accidents. And
and if you're young like that, you're typically staying up later, and
Yeah.
that's a thing. And that's what remind me to circle back to talk about like chronotypes, like morning person versus a night owl and stuff, because there's some like biology to that, especially as it relates to age and like you're saying with kids. But before I start going on just like tangent of like research, but it's funny because we're all sleep deprived right now, ironically, and we're doing a podcast about sleep. So
perfect. Yeah. Whoops.
So this will encourage everyone.
It's gonna be good. We're all gonna figure this out.
And then we're all gonna sleep so well. So your question was, what is sleep and why do we need it?
Yeah.
So to answer what the heck is sleep, just think about it for a second. Like 1/3 of your life is being spent in a state of just unconsciousness. Like, why the heck, if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint of, you know, as humans, in order to survive and repopulate, like we're looking to reproduce, and we're looking for food, and we're looking for society, we're looking for community, and these are the things that allow us to thrive and live. So why the hell would we be unconscious for 1/3 of our day when it's so crucial for us to like repopulate and feed? You can't eat when you're sleeping. You can't have sex when you're sleeping unless you have some sort of issue with like acting out dreams and things. You're not reproducing and you're not feeding. And so like for you to be sleeping, that is such a disadvantage to our species, right? And so you cannot question whether it's important, because if it wasn't absolutely crucial, we would have like evolutionarily evolved to not need sleep. But here we are. Like every single day we need sleep. Sleep is so crucial that if you deprive someone of sleep, they'll die quicker than if you deprive them of food. So you could argue sleep is actually more essential than just nutrients. So it's more important for you to be sleeping. And you think back to like hunter-gatherer tribes, like they still needed to sleep more so than they needed to go find food and eat. And it's wild. And so that's just to say, like, you know, you ask, why do we need sleep? There's a bunch of hypotheses and things that happen when we're sleeping that give us an idea of why we need sleep. But there's so much that remains to be explored and discovered. Like, what actually is happening when we sleep, and why is it making up so much of our day? Yeah. Like 1/3 of our lives, we are unconscious and sleeping, hopefully, unless you're depriving yourself of sleep. Like, what the heck is going on? It's almost like, the way that I like to think of it is that when you're awake during the day, it is so hard for your body to be awake that it needs to default back to this like resting and sleep form. And so sleep is probably this like innate type of existence that we had and then evolved to actually be awake, you know, and then default back to this sleep, if that makes sense. But again, that's just to kind of like try to highlight this, like, okay, this is a big freaking deal. Like we need to freaking sleep. And well, I don't know which direction you guys want me to take this. I mean,
Like, what are the stages
let's
of
start.
sleep? I'm not really familiar with what the stages are.
so like what the
Yeah.
heck
Why they're
happens
important.
when we sleep?
Like
Yeah.
REM,
Yep. Yeah.
REM,
Yep.
deep, light.
Yep.
Like what happens during each stage,
Yeah.
and what is the importance of each stage?
Yeah. So yeah, like what the hell happened? We know sleep's important. I mean, it's pretty clear, but what the hell happens when you fall asleep? So it's kind of interesting when you look at somebody who's sleeping. The gold standard way to assess this is using what's called polysomnography. It's a way we can actually measure brainwave activity, and that's the best telltale sign of if you're sleeping or not and what stage of sleep you're in. Because when you're awake, your brain, these neural circuits in your brain are producing this electrical activity that we can measure, and it's going all over the place. When you fall asleep, the brainwave activity starts to change a little bit. We see different wavelengths, and we see them kind of synchronize a little bit more. You know, there's more of like a pattern to the brainwave activity. And so this initial onset of sleep, if you were to monitor somebody as they're falling asleep, if I were to just stand there and like stare at you, Joe, as you're sleeping, first of all, you probably wouldn't fall asleep, but if you did,
I would fall asleep. I could fall asleep.
You'd be comfortable.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
You see, there's a video of me sleeping in a chair, like with my elbows on my knee and my neck just like straight down in the ground.
Yeah.
I'm out.
That's
snoring.
how my wife Allie is. Where no matter where she is, if she needs sleep, she's gonna sleep. I have like a photo album of just like her sleeping in the strangest positions. It's a skill set that I don't have.
It's a good one to have. I'll tell you that.
But so if I were to monitor you, Joe, as you're falling asleep, what we would see is your respiratory rate would start to slow down. You'd be taking breaths less frequently. Your heart rate would drop. Your blood pressure would drop. Your body's kind of getting into this calming state. There's a couple different branches of your nervous system that we've talked about in this podcast, your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Your parasympathetic nervous system is that rest and digest form of your nervous system. That becomes very active to induce sleep. It has to be active because that's the part of your nervous system that's like, hey, yo, sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight stuff, we got to cool it on that because we need to rest and fall asleep. And that process involves, this decline in all your vital signs. Or not decline, that makes it sound like a negative thing. It's just a reduction, a drop in heart rate and all this stuff. And another thing that happens is your body temperature actually drops too. So in order to fall asleep and stay asleep, your body temperature has to drop about 2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Kind of learned about that in the sauna.
Yeah,
That's
right,
Yeah.
because you can use the sauna to heat yourself up to force your
the
body to
cooling.
cool itself
Or
down.
take a hot shower
right.
at night too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the reason that it helps so much. When you heat yourself up before bed, it helps you sleep, and that's because you're allowing your body temperature to cool down. So this process happens, and then you enter into what's called light sleep. And there's 2 stages of light sleep, stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is very brief. This is the point where like you're starting to fall asleep, but you're very easily awoken. And your brainwave activity is somewhat similar to when you're awake, but it's starting to shift to, being more in sync and kind of predictable in a way. And again, you're easily awoken and you quickly enter into stage 2. Stage 2 is actually where you spend most of your night sleeping. This is your light sleep that there's a lot that remains to be discovered in terms of like what's the importance of stage 2. It seems to be really important for like learning and development. And there's a unique thing that happens in stage 2 where you get what are called sleep spindles. If you look at somebody's brainwave activity, you can see this nice synchronous activity in the neurons, and all of a sudden you get this like crazy sawtooth like brrr, change, and then it stops. And again, like this stuff totally remains to be discovered in terms of like what the hell is going on in the brain, like why is this stuff happening? But it is very predictable in terms like this happens in stage 2. And then you enter into stage 3 and 4. Stage 3 and 4 are, I mean, you can kind of group these together in terms of this is your deep sleep, stage 3 and 4. All those stages, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, those make up what are called non-REM sleep. Stage 1 and 2 are light sleep. Stage 3 and 4 are deep sleep. And then you get REM sleep. So REM sleep looks very different than non-REM in this nice, non-REM has this nice, beautiful, synchronous, very slow activity of the brain. And then you get into REM sleep and it's like, holy shit. I mean, this person looks awake. Like their brainwave activity is going nuts and their eyes start to move. Like it's pretty crazy. And your heart rate will elevate again and you'll kind of resemble this wakeful state. Body temperature will also increase at this point. It's really interesting. But your brain actually, it's almost going through your day and we'll come back to this when we cover all the stages. Actually, should I just talk about the importance of REM sleep right now?
Absolutely.
Hell, why not?
Okay, you're in it.
So, yep, I'm in it. Okay, so REM sleep, it's really interesting. If we were to plot out your stages of sleep from when you fall asleep to when you wake up, we would see this enter into stage 1, then go into stage 2, then 3 and 4, and then you kind of climb back up to stage 1 and 2, not much time in stage 1, but mostly stage 2. And you kind of climb back up at the beginning of the night. And these sleep cycles are 90 minutes in length on average. Most people, it takes about 90 minutes to go stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. That sounded really beautiful, actually.
Yeah. Are we dancing?
Yeah. So that's a sleep cycle. And those cycles will continue to happen throughout the night. You'll kind of enter up and down.
Real quick?
1, 2.
Tell me what you love me more.
So we would see you spend a lot of your time in the beginning. The first half of your sleep, the first 4 hours would be really heavy in that stage 3 and 4, that deep sleep. Second half, you're still getting that stage 2 sleep, a ton of it. But you start to favor REM sleep in that second half. And REM sleep, when we look at the importance of it and what's actually happening, we think of REM sleep as being this time where we have most of our dreams. You can dream. Okay. Yeah. You can dream in other stages of sleep, but REM sleep is that area of your sleep cycle that you have like these really bizarre, strange, like
I was playing football with your dad.
Yeah, my dad's dream of playing flag football, and you were super fast. Like
Speedy Reedy.
Like, why is my dad dreaming about flag football with Reed? So that's in REM sleep. Those are just those really strange dreams where like it feels just totally normal when you're in there, and then you look back and you're like, what the fuck was that?
Like the dreams where you're trying to run, but your feet are stuck in cement.
Yeah. There's some like research into like types of dreams and like what if this happens in your dream, or like if you're running from something you can't get away, like that's a sign of like some anxiety inducing thing in your life happening that you're constantly thinking about. Like again, this is all just speculation at this point, but you can look at trends of people's dreams, like types of dreams, and then look at categorical variables within them and see like, oh, people that are more anxious tend to have this dream of like their teeth falling out more often and stuff like that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
You can feel your teeth. It's the weirdest thing, which is very interesting. Like, why can you feel certain things in your dream?
But you don't actually feel it is the thing. But
when you trip over something and you jolt.
Yeah.
But
like,
off of, like,
you
a
think about
building.
it, if you're really anxious, you're clenching down when you're sleeping. That's why people sleep with a mouth guard in quite a bit. And so you're clenching down a ton. Yeah. You probably are experiencing some level of pain. Those receptors, those nerves in your mouth are firing, but you're not perceiving that pain. And so when somebody's asleep, like you can induce this level of sleep to perform surgery and stuff, like you're not perceiving that pain. And like obviously there's like an anesthetic component of surgery too, but it's still happening, and maybe there's something to that in terms of like clenching down in your teeth. But anyway, like, so dream state, REM sleep, you, this is gonna be a dangerous joke because like when you got your ADD, like we're both gonna go on these tangents. Reed, you just got to bring us back. So dream sleep. Now, what seems to be really important with REM sleep, and again, this happens on the second half of your night of sleep. It seems to be really important in detaching emotions from your experiences throughout the day, and kind of like basically it plays a role in emotional health. And the way to put a good context to this is think about, if I told you a joke right now and you laughed really hard at the joke, and then tomorrow I told you the exact same joke, you're not going to laugh as hard. You might laugh again thinking back to it, but the emotional experience is so separate, or I mean, it's so different. And that's because what's happening in REM sleep, your brain is basically replaying all these experiences that you had in that given day, relating it to other experiences you've had in the past, and trying to decipher like what emotions you've had to different experiences. And it will detach your like actual physical emotion to that. And so it plays a huge role in like anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. Like this is a really interesting area of research in terms of like people that experience some level of trauma. Like we often think of PTSD with like a military, somebody who's deployed and experienced some traumatic event in war and comes back and is reliving these experiences, like having these hallucinations where they actually like are re-experiencing that level of trauma. And we know that REM sleep detaches these emotions. So there's this area of research into like, okay, people with PTSD that relive this trauma, is there something going on with REM sleep? Turns out there is. People who have PTSD are not getting this REM sleep to detach that emotion. And so they're still experiencing this. And now these labs are looking into, can we induce REM sleep in these individuals to try to detach their emotions? And it's a pretty exciting area of study, trying to like help people with trauma. Right. And then there's also this like REM sleep deprivation therapy where you can deprive people of REM sleep to help explore these inner traumas and like inner emotional experiences and stuff. Yeah, it's super fascinating. So, Reed, what's up?
How do you know if you experience REM sleep or if you're not getting it? Because like when I sleep, I feel like I just lights go off, wake up, that's the next day.
Lights
like
turn
am I?
on.
Yeah, like I don't remember any vivid dreams or just
Do you
anything.
ever?
Sometimes it's rare.
Every once in a while. Yeah,
Rare.
it's every once in a while.
But like, how do you know you're achieving that unless you're like tracking it on your phone or something? Like,
so if you are going to bed and waking up and allowing yourself to sleep at a proper time and you don't have any sleep disorder or anything, your body's gonna make sure you're getting deep and REM sleep. And we'll talk a little bit about, like why certain sleep habits might mess up REM sleep specifically, why some might mess up deep sleep. But let's just first cover like what these stages are and why they're important again. But that's a good question. I mean, you don't know unless you track it.
you're tracking it.
But you can also feel if you feel restored after a night of sleep.
Okay.
Your body's making sure that it's getting deep and REM sleep. Perfect. And so I bring up REM sleep and the emotional health but there's also other roles of REM sleep. There's hypotheses that it plays a role just like deep sleep in memory and cognition. And I guess that brings us to deep sleep. Like deep sleep is this restorative sleep, this restorative process that happens in your entire body. And it's almost this, you can think of it as this section of sleep where it's like, okay, a lot happened when we were awake. We were really metabolically active, produced all these byproducts in our body. There's a lot of inflammation going on. And a lot of those inflammatory markers have made their way to the brain. And during deep sleep, it's kind of like this, like street sweepers coming through or plows coming through after like a snowfall and just cleaning the streets and making sure none of this debris is packing the streets.
It's like each stage is checking your body from toes to head.
Essentially, but deep sleep is the one that's like, you have what's called your glymphatic system. So we think of like lymphatics, this area of our cardiovascular system where we can like, it flushes out all this excess debris. Our immune cells are mobilized in our lymphatic system. And so we're very familiar with the lymphatic system in terms of like draining, people talk about it with like massage, draining toxins and things like let's flush out your lymphatic system. Well, your brain has a similar system and we call it our glymphatic system. So there's these cells called glial cells in your brain that's essentially their job is to, during deep sleep, go through and just make sure that we don't have a buildup of anything damaging in our brain. We can't do that during the day. Our brain is so active during the day. We're doing so much during the day that process doesn't occur. We need to sleep to make sure that we don't have anything going on in our body that is going to cause damage. We also regulate certain hormones in our body during this process too. Our immune system is better regulated during deep sleep as well. And so there's all these processes in our body that seem to like almost be refreshed and like and re-nourished in a way. And then REM sleep being more of like the emotional.
Okay.
So deep sleep being more like the physiological regeneration, and then REM sleep being more of like the emotional regeneration. But you're also getting your ability to like store memories in short term or long term during deep sleep as well. So like going through experiences that you had during your day, and your brain is deciding, okay, is this something that has happened multiple times? Like we're noticing a pattern here. Let's store that long term. There seems to be like an importance to this particular experience or something that you've read a bunch of times. Like let's store that in a long term portion of our brain in the hippocampus. This is the region of the brain that you store memory in. Or let's store it in more of like a short term. This doesn't seem important. And then those are the things that you're like, oh, what the hell was that? Like I just heard about it. But and yeah, so like you have this process of storing memories during this too.
Where's the short-term memory stored?
Short-term memory is also stored in the hippocampus. It's like there's just different regions of like short and long-term storage. And you get like memories stored in different areas of your cortex of your brain as well. It's insane like how much actually is happening in your brain and how much we have no freaking idea. Like it's so amazing. You look at how the brain's working at night and how like it's in sync, and like these neurons are like firing together in different regions, and like different regions are like, okay, my turn, let's all go and like do their thing. And then when you're awake, it's just like shit's firing all over the place. It is like, dude, something's going on in your brain when you're sleeping that is just unbelievable.
And you don't really control it in any way.
No, you're just like letting your brain do its thing.
The only time you can control it is when you're trying to fly in your dream.
Yeah. Lucid dreams.
Those are fun.
So would it be safe to assume people that have poor memory are not getting good quality sleep?
Absolutely. So
that correlates?
This is this really interesting. There's a few different areas of research in that exact question. Like, okay, we know sleep is essential for memory. And so people that have poor memory recall, or if you're studying for a test and you're like, God, I studied all freaking day and I just forgot everything. Well, so many people get so stressed out about exams and they spend so much time studying and they don't sleep. If you don't sleep, you can't store that memory. You can't recall that information.
Right.
So the best thing you can do when you're prepping for an exam is, one, you need to sleep the night before a big day of studying. So if you don't sleep the night before, you haven't, regenerated your brain's capacity to form these new memories in the first place. So even if you study all you want and then you go to sleep, like you don't have that memory forming capacity. And then after you study all this, if you're not sleeping well, you're not storing that information.
Interesting.
And so, memory recall, like it is like the most important thing you can do for if you're studying and trying to recall information is just get good sleep. And and there's another way to answer that question that's much more of like a sinister area of research in dementia and Alzheimer's and all these neurodegenerative diseases where your brain is like degenerating in combination of these dementia symptoms and memory loss and cognition impairment. And there's a variety of hypotheses here in terms of like, is poor sleep causing Alzheimer's, or do you get Alzheimer's and then you're not sleeping as well and then that accelerates these symptoms?
Is there anything to say like sleep apnea and dementia
absolutely
go hand in hand kind
of?
Yep.
Yeah. So what I'm going to touch on here will kind of make sense in terms of how it relates to sleep apnea.
Okay.
But when you're not getting these proper stages of sleep, when you're not getting enough sleep, you're not allowing your brain enough time to, plow the streets after that snowfall, you get a buildup of these damaging components. And a couple of these components are these proteins that we know quite a bit about, which are called beta amyloid and tau. Beta amyloid and tau are essentially these proteins that will build up in your brain. And we've correlated very well in terms of if you have a buildup of these proteins, you're at so much more of a risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia related symptoms. There's different forms of dementia too that also have these proteins that build up. And so when you have an increased amount of these proteins in your brain, your dementia symptoms are worse and you develop Alzheimer's. And so you develop Alzheimer's and you're also sleeping worse when you have Alzheimer's. That's a symptom of the disease. And so then it gets worse and worse and worse. And so you see this rapid decline in cognitive function and memory. And it's because of the snowballing effect. Like what actually is causing what, we don't know, but it makes perfect sense to form a hypothesis saying if you're not sleeping well, you get the buildup of these proteins, you get these neurodegenerative diseases, and then boom.
So could that inducing of REM sleep, like with the PTSD, would that potentially help with dementia?
Yeah, so this is another area of research in terms of like if we can help dementia or patients with dementia, patients with Alzheimer's and other forms of neurodegeneration, can we induce sleep and try to improve symptoms? And that's an ongoing area of investigation, but I mean, it seems like a pretty exciting area in terms of like there seems to be some pretty clear benefit provided from being able to sleep and reducing symptoms, reducing the onset of disease. There's an interesting paper that came out in 2013 with a bunch of individuals that they followed and just looked at. So they had a bunch of people come in and they measured their sleep over a course of 2 weeks. So you can get an idea of like not just one night. Everyone's going to sleep differently in one night, but they measured sleep over the course of 2 weeks and were able to group people into quantity and quality of sleep. And one of the things they found was if you had more fragmented sleep, like you're waking up more and you're like not sleeping continuously throughout the night, you had fragmented sleep, you're at a 22% increase of developing dementia and Alzheimer's. So they follow these people long term, and compared to somebody who is sleeping more continuously. So they like basically split these groups into like people who woke up a lot, people who didn't wake up a lot. And that's just one component to sleep quality. Then you look at the research in terms of like people who get less than 7 hours of sleep versus people who get more than 7 hours of sleep. And you see these statistics hold even more so true in terms of like if you're sleeping less than 7 hours per night, you have this huge increase in risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And so it clearly plays a role here. Now, this 7 to 9 hours, this is the recommended range of sleep. So we often hear like try to get 8 hours of sleep. Well, the reason this is when you look into the research and these types of studies that group people in terms of like, okay, how much sleep are these people getting, and what types of health outcomes are we measuring here? Like are people who are sleeping 7 hours, are they getting diseases like people who are sleeping 5? And it turns out like the people in the 7 to 9 hour group are they're free from disease and free from, metabolic dysfunction, anxiety, depression, and all these things. Like that seems to be the optimum amount to allow all these sleep cycles to happen, to allow all this regeneration to happen. But it's kind of funny when you think about like, why is there 7 to 9? Why isn't it like just sleep 7 hours? Anything more than that is good. Well, people who sleep more than 9 hours actually are just as unhealthy as people who sleep less than 7. Now, This is called hypersomnia, and it's actually likely related to the fact that if you're sleeping that much, there's probably some underlying issue that your body needs to sleep so much to try to record. You might have some, chronic sleep deprivation that has caused you to be in poor health and forced your body to sleep longer. And so you're not actually as healthy. You shouldn't need to sleep more than 9 hours.
Unless you're a teenager, younger person that needs more sleep, correct?
That is a great point to make. I'm talking adults here. Now, What's interesting when you look into like...
Nice save, Reed.
There's something like when a newborn baby, as you develop all the way until you're like 25 years old, your brain stops developing. Like your brain's pretty much fully developed at that point. Well, the amount of sleep you need is the highest when you're born and then kind of declines to this once you're an adult, around that 20 to 25 years old, you only need that 7 to 9 hours. Now, teenagers, for example, like these kids were sent into high school that were forcing them to wake up so early. they need 10 to 12 hours. They need more sleep than we do as adults. But we just assume, so many parents assume like, oh, that they're going to sleep as much as we do. But no, their brain is developing. They require more of this, these processes that happen when you're sleeping to allow for brain development. And so if you shortchange them of that, that's going to slow down this development of the brain, and you're going to lead to like cognitive issues, depression, anxiety, metabolic disease, all these things. And like, it makes sense when we see a trend in these diseases in our youth. And there's a variety of things, but sleep is probably one of them, because we are in this society now that it's like we shift to earlier and earlier start times. Like adults are trying to just always start as early as they can so they can get done earlier. Well, that causes you to like, oh, I need to find a school for my kid that starts early so I can drop them off, because I don't want to pay for daycare in the morning if my kid doesn't start school. They have to be on my same schedule. Yep, they got to be on my schedule. So then you got your kids on mom and dad's schedule that now, like they're forced to wake up earlier than they need to. That's causing issues in their ability to learn the material while they're at school. It's causing car accidents, like we said. It's causing all these mental health, metabolic diseases, and it's one of the many components. Obviously, there's other things going on here too, but yeah, we it's unfortunate. We have this society where it's like, oh, sleep when you're dead. Like, you don't need sleep and blah, blah, blah. And
I always said that in college. You can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
Like, no.
And it's
So
such
you
a
want to
horrible...
enjoy all
you hit
those
30,
experiences in college.
Yep.
It's such a horrible outlook. And you have all these like, successful politicians and business people that pride themselves on like only sleeping
like
5
Elon
hours.
Musk, he'll like sleep at work. He'll get like no sleep, and he'll just always work.
I've heard of a thing where you sleep and you do sections of sleep. So you sleep for 3 hours, wake up, do work for 3 hours.
Oh, is it the Uberman where it's like 90? I think it's like 90 minute bouts.
But yeah, it's like you do short spurts of sleep, then you do some work, and then you do another short spurt of sleep and do some work.
Yeah.
So they're getting more hours of work in a day type of thing.
Well, that's the problem, is we're just like so obsessed with work and productivity, and like if you're sleeping, you're lazy, and
right.
But it actually is.
So if you're under 25, they're not lazy. They're doing it for their brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's another component that makes this even worse. So when you're newborn up until your teens, when you start going through puberty, you're much more of like a morning lark, what we call chronotype. So a chronotype is like your circadian rhythm, your sleep-wake cycle. And so a newborn up until puberty, they tend to wake up a lot earlier. They're more of this like morning lark. They need a lot more sleep. They're going to be napping a lot during the day, but they wake up earlier. Now, when you're a teenager, that chronotype actually shifts periodically. When you're in these huge developmental stages, and you'll see teenagers start to stay up a little bit later and sleep in. And again, society looks at that as like, oh, they're lazy, they're just up late, and then they sleep until 11 noon, and it's because they're lazy and blah, blah, blah. And it's such a bummer. It's like, no, it's not because they're lazy. Like, that is their physiological chronotype. There is biology to this. Like, we are aware of the genes that regulate these chronotypes, and we know that this shift happens with teenagers, and it's such a bummer because they get scolded in terms of like,
I remember,
wake up, you're wasting the whole day. And all
every Saturday morning, I'd hear the vacuum hit my door. My dad be vacuuming at 7 a.m.
going to the dishwasher just really loud.
Yeah. It's like,
well, and then that it shifts. So like your mom and dad are waking up super early, so it shifts back to a morning chronotype when we get older. That's why there's all these senior specials and all these like breakfast places at like 6 a.m. because all these retired folks, like they're getting up early. And so there's these there's reasons that this stuff is happening. There's biology to it, but our society is just like, oh, they're just lazy, and it's such a bummer. But yeah, I mean, you look into the research on if you push start times later and the benefit that that's providing to the youth. Like,
I think there has been a shift. I've seen more schools switching to that, and just like less time starting later, just so they do get more sleep. So I think it is being addressed,
right?
But not before, like when we were in school,
right?
There was like nap time when you were real young.
Oh yeah,
nap time. I would never nap though.
You were that kid.
I had a place
spitballs
right next to the teacher. She was like, Joe, You need to come and sleep over here because you keep fucking with the other kids, keeping them awake.
I can see it now.
Nap time. What about nap time? Nap time good?
Nap time? Is nap time? Yeah, that's a really good question.
Naps.
So
Since
naps, like, I love naps.
I love naps.
I hate naps.
When I was in undergrad, I mean, I used to nap. I don't nap much anymore.
Those are fighting words.
I get angry after a nap. I don't know why. Like, I wake up and I'm like, leave me alone. Leave me alone.
A little bit more tired. Sometimes like that'll happen to me if I'm sleep deprived and I nap and I wake up, I'm still sleep deprived and I'm like even more tired. But the thing with naps, so naps can be very beneficial, but you have to be strategic with them. So if you have a night of poor sleep, getting more sleep is never going to be a problem. And so absolutely take a nap if you feel like you need a nap. It's giving yourself more sleep. But what happens with a lot of people that incorporate naps into their daily routine is it impacts their sleep cycle later that night. So if you're taking a nap and it's resulting in you not falling asleep as easily at night or you staying up later, then that nap is probably actually detrimental because you want to have this nice sleep continuity at night where you can, or sleep consistency. And this is another circadian component of like, if you can structure your sleep-wake cycle to be consistent, you will find that your ability to fall asleep and how you feel when you wake up is going to be so enhanced. And it's because you get on this circadian rhythm of like consistent sleep-wake cycle. Why the hell are you smiling?
Dude, I'm remembering like in high school, you would have a power nap. It was you.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It was like 10 minutes. You'd be the most tired out of anybody. Like, I just need 10 minutes. You take 10-minute nap. You get up, energy of like a gazelle. He was just bouncing up walls. It was a funny. So it just popped in my head when you were saying that. I was just like,
it's funny because maybe there was some, like, I've always just been so obsessed with sleep.
and he just,
so, yeah,
guys,
and
I
then
just
it
need
led me to
10
my
minutes. We
PhD.
give him 10 minutes. Boom.
Yeah.
Back at it.
I forgot about that.
Oh,
Wow.
gosh,
Those
it
power
just-
naps. I need those power naps again.
I must be getting good deep sleep because my memories are just long-term memories.
They're
are just
coming
boom.
back.
My
Yeah, dude.
hippocampus
You got
is just on point.
You got that deep sleep. My hippocampus. That,
Sorry,
like,
I just totally like
no,
took away what you were just saying, but it just popped right in my head.
I don't remember what I was saying.
Yeah, kind of forgot.
Power naps.
Oh, naps. Yeah. So like,
Yeah.
We're talking about naps.
go ahead. Use an app. I mean, if it's because you were sleep deprived and you need a nap the next day, by all means do it.
I mean, sometimes your body just tells. Like the other day, I was chilling on the couch and just fell asleep.
Yeah.
Wasn't like planning to, but my body was
Yeah.
like, "You need this.
Let it
now."
happen, and your
Submit
your
to
body
me.
will
Shut
force
down.
you to sleep. Just if you can do naps earlier in the day, those are always going to be more beneficial because you allow this sleep pressure to develop. So, we can talk a little bit about like the physiology of sleep. I've already talked about like what happens when you sleep, but that feeling, like you're saying, of like sitting on the couch and you fell asleep. There's some processes that are happening during the day that cause that to happen. And you can think of them as sleep pressure. So like almost like a pressure cooker. Like you let all this stuff build up in that pressure cooker.
That 2:00 feeling.
Yeah. Well, that,
Take a 5-hour energy.
yeah, there's also some component to that too. Our like that afternoon crash in terms of your circadian biology and how it fluctuates throughout the day. I don't want to go too much into circadian rhythm because I'd love to like spend a whole episode talking about it. But your circadian rhythm and what regulates sleep-wake cycle is not super perfect throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
You do have these changes that kind of mimic your energy level, and like
Yeah.
you notice these afternoon changes, and that is totally circadian driven. But what happens when you're going about your day is you get a buildup of a molecule called adenosine. And adenosine is, think of it as like a byproduct of metabolism when your body's using a bunch of energy. And that adenosine is this signal to your brain that when you get enough of it, it's like, okay, we've had a long day. We need to shut down and go to sleep. And that's actually what caffeine is or how caffeine works, is it will go bind to those adenosine receptors and not allow for adenosine to communicate to the brain. So you're basically cutting off that sleep pressure. So caffeine makes you feel more awake. You're pushing that sleep pressure away. And so you're not allowing adenosine to do its thing. So adenosine is this component of sleep pressure, but then you also get melatonin. So melatonin is this hormone that's secreted from this area of your brain called the pineal gland. And this hormone plays a lot of interesting roles in your body that we're just now starting to uncover. But one that we've known quite a bit about for quite some time now is its ability to increase the sleep pressure and this drive to fall asleep. So when you wake up in the morning, you've got this spike in cortisol. Cortisol is like this hormone that happens when your body's trying to ramp up metabolic rate, mobilize fuel like glucose, and it also happens when you're really stressed out. So when you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system is really active. That's that fight or flight, and your sympathetic nervous system is that like wakefulness, and so cortisol spikes. That happens in the morning naturally. You see this cortisol spike, and melatonin is at its lowest level at that point. Now, throughout the day, cortisol should start to decline.
Oh, so it's kind of like a shift.
Yep. And then late at night, you see this peak in melatonin. Now, it's interesting because this pineal gland in your brain, its way to communicate with the outside world is through this area called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. That's what regulates your circadian rhythm. And that suprachiasmatic nucleus, sorry for all the biology here, it's got this view to the outside world. It's able to see.
Is your third eye?
It's your third eye. So you've got these neurons in the backside of your brain that are looking for light, basically. And like if it's light out, it's telling that area of the brain, like, hey, it's daytime, it's daytime, it's daytime. Make sure that melatonin's keeping itself quiet because we don't want to sleep right now. We got all this daylight going on. And so that's why like sunlight in the morning it is so beneficial for you because it's that initial signal to that suprachiasmatic nucleus to be like, hey, melatonin, shut down. Let's start all these processes, release cortisol, release our metabolic rate. Let's wake the hell up, right? But the problem with society right now is we have so much freaking light. Like we don't have darkness anymore, and it's such a bummer. Like we have such a lack of darkness. I know that sounds kind of like scary and depressing, but like we need some darkness in our life because when you've got these LED lights at home and you've got these, phones and tablets that you're looking at all night, your brain doesn't know how to decipher between, the light from outside and these artificial light sources that you're giving it. And so you keep hushing melatonin. And without the production of melatonin, you don't get that drive to sleep. And so that's why when you're sitting at your phone, you're not getting as tired. If you shut your phone off, like you're like, oh, I just can't sleep. I'm not tired. I'm staying awake all night. Well, I guarantee you, if you turn the lights off, put your phone away, you'd fall asleep because you allow that melatonin production to happen. And now we're kind of like dipping into like artificial light and blue light glasses and all that. And
yeah, well, with my new segment, it's Reed's Reddit finds. I think we should do that because I actually have one of those questions from
Reed's
a
Reddit finds.
Yeah, Reed's Reddit finds. I just came up with it.
Slips off the tongue.
Let me know if you like it or not.
Slippery.
Trademark hashtag. So, yeah,
Reed's
Reed's Reddits. What do we got?
Reddit's
All right.
finds.
So I just looked up sleep, and I just looked through interesting questions people had about sleep. Like, what are people asking? And the first one I got was, why is going to bed super late bad for you if you still get the same amount of sleep? I've never thought about that before, but I'm like, I'm saving this one. I think this would be very interesting.
That's a really interesting observation, and there is a lot of science to that. So when and there's this area of research in terms of like looking at people on the weekends versus during the day. And I talked about how you need sleep consistency. You need a consistent sleep-wake cycle. Well, when you shift the time you go to bed and time you wake up, which happens a lot on the weekends, you're basically simulating this jet lag. And what happens when that shift, there's a couple things that happen. First thing that happens is you're messing up that rhythm of deep sleep and REM sleep here. So if you stay up later, remember how I talked about deep sleep makes up that first 4 hours? Mm-hmm. Well, if you've shifted your sleep just 2 hours later than usual, and then you slept a little bit longer, you're shifting to lose out on that deep sleep. And the same goes true for like if you're naturally going to bed late and sleeping in, and then all of a sudden during the week, your job forces you to wake up at the ass crack of dawn, and you don't feel very restored, but you could have gone to sleep at like 8 p.m. the night before, still got 8 hours of sleep, but you're still so tired. That's because you've got this chronotype that isn't in line with your day-to-day function. And so you're waking up earlier, you're losing out on some of that REM sleep. And so like those are the days you wake up and you like feel like emotionally all over the place. Remember how I talked about like REM sleep has this emotional component? And side tangent, like if you drink alcohol, you disturb REM sleep. And so that's why if you've ever had a night out and you wake up and emotions are just like super wacky, you know, like you could cry easier, you could laugh easier, you get sadder, you like watch a scary movie.
Yeah. I love you, bro.
So like
I cried to a surf movie one morning. It was like it wasn't sad at all. But it might have been sad.
Yeah,
but I was
Surf's
like
Up.
bawling.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, or if you like wake up super early for a flight and you miss out on REM sleep, like you're just like emotionally a little bit different. There's your biology for that. Like there's a reason that happens. And so it's important that you know your chronotype. If you're a night owl or a morning lark, like, or somewhere in between. And a way to do that, and one of like the coolest things that came out of COVID was there was a reduction in a lot of these, you know, wow, I haven't even touched on cardiovascular and all that stuff, but basically like COVID actually improved a lot of people's health. And a huge portion of that is because of the sleep cycle that you were able to get yourself on.
Yeah,
and so
you're
when
working from home,
you
can
didn't have
wake
to
up
travel,
10 minutes before you have to be in a meeting.
Yeah.
So they're sleeping until 7:50.
Yeah, and so if you have a period of time where you can just naturally try to figure out when do you feel like you need to sleep, allow yourself to sleep, and then when do you wake up without an alarm clock? At first, it's going to be really hard to test that because most people are just sleep deprived. You know, we live in this society where people just aren't sleeping. And so you're going to be like, well, I slept
when you're
until noon. Like, but that's because you're doing this like rebound sleep of your body trying to make up for this lost ground.
What's there to say about like even if I went to bed late, but ass crack of dawn comes and my body clock says get up?
What do you mean?
So even if I went to bed at midnight, let's say,
Yeah,
my weekly body clock is 5:30 in the morning. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, even if I went to bed at midnight.
So that's actually a really good thing for you to know. Like you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, your body has adapted to that. You must be more of like a morning person. Like naturally, you probably wake up earlier. And so what you're doing, you're kind of doing a disservice by staying up late on the weekends then, because you're missing out on that deep sleep, that regenerative sleep, and you're likely still getting that REM sleep because you're naturally waking up at that time in the morning. And so try shifting your bedtime earlier, and then you should be able to get, you know, the efficient amount of deep sleep and REM sleep. It was really interesting when I was doing my PhD research, and I tracked people's sleep, and when we'd look back at the data after like 12 weeks, I was able to plot out for people. So they were totally blinded. They could not see the data until after the 12 weeks. And then I would tell them, okay, this is, you know, this week to this week, or I grouped them by months and looked at, okay, what was going on in your life at this time? You know, you lost out on REM sleep. Were you waking up way earlier? Or, hey, you lost out on deep sleep. Were you staying up later? And it's so predictable. You know, like it's like, oh yeah, I mean, that's when I was doing this for work. So I was waking up earlier, and you see REM sleep lacking. And it's like, you know, it's so interesting, and it's cool because it's so easy for you to kind of fix in your own day-to-day life, is try to figure out where you feel the most restored. Give yourself 8 hours of sleep opportunity. And what that means is 8 hours in your bed. And that'll allow you to hopefully get a bulk of that as sleep. And so if you do that and you feel restored, and you can consistently do that at the same time for a while, you'll find this nice circadian rhythm component to it, and you'll be getting sufficient deep sleep and REM sleep. Now, there's not like a certain number for like the same number for everyone in terms of like how much deep sleep should you get, how much REM sleep should you get. But a good rule of thumb is like both of those should make up about 20% of your sleep. And so when you look at your sleep tracking devices, which this is a whole nother area that we could go down in terms of like sleep trackers and like accuracy and all that. But yeah, you want about 20%. Now, what's interesting is if you have vacation, a week-long vacation, and you're staying up a lot later than usual, when you go back home and get back into your regular routine, your body's going to rebound into deep sleep much more because you've just deprived it of deep sleep. And I mean, if you're drinking alcohol, then you're depriving it of REM sleep. And so then it's going to try to get REM sleep. Your body's really good at like, okay, like what are we lacking in lately? Let's do that because either we got to take care of this like cognition, memory, emotional health, and like it's going to do that. And so you get this rebound sleep. But the problem is you can't really make up for lost sleep very well. Like if you're not sleeping well throughout your life, you can't just be like, all right, I'm going to take a week of sleeping super well and
make up for the last 6 months. Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you can't just sleep longer because it's not beneficial.
Yeah, if you get over that 9, that's
spouts.
7 to 9, like that, getting 10 plus when you're adult, it's not like.
Yeah, well, I don't want to like push people to think that if they sleep longer than 9 hours, that's going to be detrimental.
Okay.
The research kind of points us in the direction of people who tend to sleep regularly, those long durations, tend to actually have some underlying chronic issue.
Okay.
And that's not to like scare people of like, oh shit, I sleep 10 hours a night.
Yeah,
do I have cancer? No, that's not what I'm saying. But what is interesting is like there could be there's a reason your body's sleeping that long. So if you're sleeping longer than 9 hours naturally, don't worry about it. It could be just like rebound sleep trying to.
Or people just like to sleep.
Yeah. People love to sleep.
So like, what if you get 7 to 9 hours and then going back to the naps? I know we're still in Reed's Reddit finds, but
forgot we
so
were on
like
Reed's Reddit
you sleep
finds.
7 to 9 hours, but you still get like 1 or 2 30 minutes to an hour long naps in.
Yep.
Is that going to be detrimental or is that beneficial for you?
No. So, I mean, that you should listen to your body there. And like, if you're getting 7 hours of sleep and you're still really tired, then that means that you're probably still a little sleep deprived. And so take that nap, but don't let it drop that 7 hours down to 6 hours that night.
Yeah.
So just don't let that nap interfere with sleep.
Yeah. All right. Second question on Reed's Reddit finds. Let's go. How can some people sleep so little and still have so much energy?
Yeah. So like it's funny when you look at people, like how many times have you heard so like, oh yeah, I only need 5 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Like
that used to be
5 hours, that's all I need. And it's because you get so adjusted to like this day-to-day routine that your sleep deprived state becomes your norm at that point. And if you like, there's some research that Matthew Walker's group over at UC Davis has done with people who like naturally seem to sleep less than 6 hours, or right around 6 hours, and then when they bring them into a lab to allow them to sleep as long as they can, they're sleeping just like everyone else. 7.5 hours is like seems to be the optimum amount of time. So like they're not just like, oh, I only need 5 hours of sleep. Like that is such a lie. It's just because people get so accustomed to it, and that just becomes their default state of just being in constant sleep deprivation.
And then they overcompensate with caffeine.
Yeah, and then those are people that are always chugging caffeine and just like, oh no, I'm fine. But it's like if you just slept like 7 to 8 hours, you'd be so much better. And
you just don't know it.
There is this very small group of people that have a mutation in a gene called the DEC2 gene. And this gene mutation, for whatever reason, these people actually only need 5 hours of sleep. They sleep 5 hours and they're not experiencing these physiological detriments and all this. They're getting all this restoration and able to just handle this 5 hours. But the odds that somebody who says they only need 5 hours of sleep has this DEC2 gene mutation is so minuscule. Like it's not
Are
common.
they still getting the same effects? Like the snow plows are just like getting rid of all that stuff in 5 hours?
It's amazing.
Well,
so
we
like
can make
now,
superhumans with that.
Yeah.
That
So now there's this whole area of research into like this DEC2 gene and like, could we try to like make it so we don't have to sleep as much? Yeah. And it's funny, like our society is so like, how can we make people as productive as possible and like take away sleep?
Oh.
But yeah, so
business idea.
People that say they're not sleeping, I mean, that's such bullshit.
All right, the third question from Reddit. Why does blue light mess up your sleep?
Yeah, so this gets back to what I was talking about with melatonin. So these really like short wavelength light forms, and I'm not a physics person by any means, but like the like blue white light have these short wavelengths, and then you get into like red, like more like warm colored lights have like these slower wavelengths. Well, the short frequent wavelength form of light is what's picked up by those receptors in the back of our eye that communicate with the suprachiasmatic nucleus to tell the pineal gland to not produce melatonin. So basically, that wavelength shuts off melatonin production. And
Also, that first step in the sleep cycle,
Right.
it's just like it's not kicking in yet because you still have that blue light.
exactly.
Oh.
And
It's
so
just keeping you going.
So your brain actually thinks it's daytime. And so it's going to be like, hey, let's ramp up all these processes of daylight, like cortisol production. And cortisol has these nasty effects when it's chronically elevated. So it releases a lot of glucose in the bloodstream. We release a lot of insulin, and we hyperactivate this sympathetic branch of the nervous system. This leads to things like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, anxiety, depression, like those chronically elevated like sympathetic state is just this like hyper stress state. And the way you improve that is through sleep. And that's just one component of how, like, if you're losing out on sleep, you're at so much more of a risk of all these diseases. So before I keep going on the tangent, your question is, so blue light basically like mimics daylight for your body, and it keeps you from sleeping.
Okay. So that 65-inch TV I mounted on my wall in my bedroom was a bad idea.
It's in your bedroom.
Yeah. Oh, that thing's massive. And I was
Yeah.
like, ooh.
So there's this,
Oh, already bought it.
there's another area of research on like your bedroom, and like subconsciously your brain associates different rooms and different environments with different activities. And so if you're like on your phone, on your computer, watching TV in your bedroom, you're associating that with like a daytime routine. Now, your bedroom should be used for sex and sleeping, and that's it. Like if you can adjust, because that is like okay, this is my environment that I'm sleeping in. And there's actually some research on like having sex before bed, and this is true for even like masturbation. So having sex that leads to an orgasm and masturbation both improve sleep quality. And so those factors, along with just like not having this blue light or this external influence to your bedroom, allow your body to associate that bedroom with sleep specifically. You guys are like, oh.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's
How
interesting.
the turns table.
How the turntables. How the turntables have turned.
Yeah, that's what it was.
But so yeah, I mean, like
So what
the
about
blue light. Don't do stuff in your bedroom that is
crazy, though,
associated with daytime.
I put the TV on and it puts me basically in that first stage. Like I turn it on and it's just like, all right, time to go to bed. And like I shut down immediately. If I don't have anything, I sit there and just
your brain
listen to like the cracks and like the floorboards, and I'm like,
so that's something a little bit different.
maybe
in
just like I
terms of-
need white noise or something without lights.
Well, that is a sign that you haven't given yourself enough downtime during your day. And this is this amazing area of research with meditation and like basically having this time away from screens and like external stimulus
Oh, it's hard.
to allow those thoughts to happen. And because when you lay down in bed and your brain is just nonstop, that's because
every
that's the
night.
first time you're just sitting there with your thoughts and listening to your thoughts
Nothing
and
worse.
thinking through
And
things.
it's getting worse nowadays because like everybody's on their
So
phones
connected.
all the time. Like
Yeah, like look at you. You just checked your watch. Like
While
you don't
talking
even need
about
your
it.
phone.
I'm getting a phone call from somebody
Yeah, see on your watch
on
and
my
like
watch.
how like constant.
I didn't even like. I didn't even like think about it.
Yeah,
Just
and that's my point. Like you've got so much. So like for your TV thing and like how you can't sleep without the sound, and that's just you. Like if you've got the TV on, it's distracting you from those thoughts, and you're like allowing the TV sound to distract till you're just like forced into sleep.
Yeah.
So what would be so much more beneficial is to ditch the TV and try to have some like wind down time whether it's, reading a book, something without screens, or like spending time without external stimulus before bed to allow yourself to like naturally fall asleep. It'll work wonders.
I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna give it a month try.
And that like the same is true for like clock faces.
When it's your routine,
I'm in such a routine.
hard.
It's gonna be really tough to cut that out. But I'm gonna try it.
I mean,
you
could
use a
do-
noise machine if
Yeah, I
you're
was
worried
gonna
about.
say that.
If you're
I'll just
worried
take
about,
it from Macy. That's fine. All right, the next one I think this is gonna be a cakewalk for you. How can I reset my circadian rhythm? Like rhythm.
how can you reset your circadian rhythm? Well, I like reset. Reset is kind of a funky way to think about it. More like how you should think about it is like, how can I regulate my circadian rhythm?
Okay.
So I mentioned sleep-wake cycle. That's just one component of our circadian rhythm in terms of like when our body is awake and when it's sleeping. Now, if you can keep your body on a consistent sleep-wake cycle, it allows both of those processes to function optimally. What I mean by that is it allows sleep and your sleep cycles to function optimally, and it allows when you're awake, all these metabolic processes, your cardiovascular system, cognitive function, allows those to perform optimally. Now, the way to get that more aligned is consistency. Allow your body to adapt to a set time of I go to bed at this time, I wake up at this time. And over time, you're going to get more rhythmic in the circadian rhythm. And so circadian rhythm is like this, what's called an oscillation in a bunch of different genes and processes that go up and down throughout the 24-hour day. And if you can allow that process to just happen nice and consistently, it will. And you'll see higher peaks and lower troughs, a nice, beautiful flow to it.
Nice, beautiful flow.
And the way to do that is through consistency. And another amazing thing to help regulate circadian rhythm.
Exercise.
There it is. Like, softball.
I was going to say protein, but I
Collagen.
was like, no.
Exercise is amazing in terms of like its ability to improve sleep quality. Like you look at like what improves sleep the most, exercise hands down.
Yeah.
If,
What about exercising before you go to bed though?
So-
I heard that elevates your heart. What elevates your heart rate? Obviously.
But
Yeah.
also, it brings your body temperature up.
So this is an interesting area of research where people, were thinking, okay, if we exercise too close to bedtime, we've got this increased metabolic rate. But there are a variety of papers looking at people who exercise in a window 3 hours before bed and show that it does not it makes sleep worse. Now, the thing is, there could still be, a lot of times when people do a workout, they're coming home and eating a huge meal, and that's a whole nother factor of like, you need to let your body temperature come down. You need to let heart rate, respiratory rate, and all that come down. If you work out and then try to sleep immediately after, it's going to be freaking hard for you to fall asleep, right? And so I would advise to not exercise within a couple hours of bed because you're just ramping up all these processes that your body has to bring down. But the thing with exercise is you're making your body so much better at that exact process. When you raise all these things and raise metabolic rate, your body's so good at what's called thermoregulation now. It can regulate body temperature wonderfully. And so when you lay down for bed, super easy. Your body's like, all right, bedtime, let's go. I'm going to drop all these processes. We're going to go right into sleep. We're going to stay asleep perfectly. And yeah, so I just want to put a little plug in for exercise.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you eat late at night, if you have a large meal at night, you're going to sleep like shit. And it's because your body temperature has to stay elevated as you break down all the foods that you ate.
All right, this one, not my favorite question, but recovering from an all-nighter. So we were kind of talking about that, like how your memory is not as good. So like you're studying for exam, your hippocampus is affected. You're not getting that just plowing right through, getting rid of all the old stuff. But how do you recover from an all-nighter? Like this guy was on 32 hours straight of being awake. Like how do you recover from that?
Why was
Just
he
get back.
32 hours awake?
For an exam.
Well,
So like
Luke just said that if you're not sleeping, you're not remembering any of your shit.
Right,
that you're
yeah, that's what
studying,
I was,
so
like, it's affecting your hippocampus.
you don't make a
You're not getting
mistake,
that.
boy.
yeah, tell them to listen to the podcast. Well, my recommendation, first of all, is like don't ever get yourself into that situation. Like that is such a horrible thing for you.
Sounds like a procrastination.
How do you
situation.
well, some people just like that's their thing. It's just like
That was
study as
my
much
thing,
as you
yeah.
can
Cramming it,
beforehand
yeah.
and don't sleep. But as far as recovery, sleep. I mean, like, if you're depriving yourself of sleep, go get sleep. Like, get as much sleep as you can.
Should you do it all in one bout, or should you be like, get your 7, 8, 9 hours, wake up, and then get your 7, just get back to a normal routine? Or would you say, like, I've been up for 32 hours, I'm going to sleep for 24?
Yeah, the thing with being up for so long is that if you allow yourself to sleep as much as you can, it's probably not going to impact your ability the following night to get back into that 7 to 9
because
rhythm.
you're so deprived.
Right. But if you like are like you sleep 12 hours and then all of a sudden you can't fall asleep the following night, then that's why.
It just comes back to keeping your regular sleep at the 7 to 9 rather than
just don't let anything
that.
Screw that up.
All right. Well, that was the end of Reed's Reddit
I like
finds.
that.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, just shoot us questions on our Instagram.
Yeah, DM us at Kickback Science and
be
ask us
afraid
any
to.
questions. And you can also submit questions on our website. Our next podcast episode is about obesity, metabolic disease, and muscle thermogenesis. So if you've got any like metabolism related questions, you can submit that. On our website. All right. That was awesome, Reed. I love the Reed's Reddits. We should end, each segment with Reed's Reddits. Now, since there's still so much to talk about with sleep, let's call this part 1. And then in part 2, we should talk a little bit more about the other questions that you had with, alcohol, caffeine, supplements, medications,
eating before bed,
and how you can improve sleep specifically. Yeah, like other questions. So, because there's still so much to cover. So, come back for part 2 next week, where we're going to talk even more sleep, because I'm telling you, this is one of the craziest areas of research, and it's just nonstop.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Kickback Science podcast. We love talking science with all of you, and if you feel the same, you can support us by subscribing, hitting that like button, and giving us a follow on our social media pages. Don't forget, you can submit questions through our website and in the comments section of all our social media. Have a good one, everyone.